Thank you, Anthony. So I want to describe our linked clinical trial program, why I think the trials that we're doing at the moment, and we've just recently completed one, are so important, and why we would like to do more trials in Australia. I have to say that that engaging with the Garvan Institute has been a tremendous experience for me. This organization really gets it. And I think from Anthony's talk that we just heard, it was a beautiful talk describing exactly what the objectives here, and we're looking forward to a lot of collaboration with the Garvan. So you know about neurodegeneration. We've been hearing about it all morning. We find that there are symptomatic therapies been available for 50 years for Parkinson's patients, but still nothing is on the drug formularies in any country of the world to slow disease progression, year-on-year neurodegeneration. And we find as an organization that completely unacceptable, and we're trying to be as transformational as quick as we can to change all of that. Currently, Parkinson's patients have symptomatic therapies with many imperfections, and I think a lot of people in this audience would know those imperfections. But there's nothing to stop the year-on-year neurodegeneration. What do we need? We need symptomatic medications that work better, and we need disease-modifying medications that work. The good news, and we heard this from Michael, I thought Michael gave a wonderful talk earlier, but in his timeline, he showed us that Parkinson's is a hotbed of current research, of breakthroughs of direct relevance to Parkinson's disease. So how can we best use that wealth of information that's coming at us very quickly to design and test in the clinic these new medications, which we believe in many cases will be transformational for the lives of Parkinson's patients? A little word about us. We're a patient-led organization. You just saw our president speak. I don't think he knew that his video was going to be shown in Sydney today. It was World Parkinson's Day, of course, and that was why he made that. So I hijacked it across the various oceans. But as an organization, we focus on the cutting edge of the science and medicine involved. We try to understand what all the scientists and clinicians are doing, and from that we develop our new therapeutic approaches, hugely collaborative approaches. But we're also involved in regenerative medicine. So we've got the GDNF trial. It's a growth factor trial. We do stem cell work, and we use dopaminergic neurons implanted into patients. So the various other things that we do on a regenerative medicine approach. But I really want to talk to you about our linked clinical trial program, which is about taking drugs which have already been used in other therapeutic areas, which have the advantage of being able to be used in Parkinson's patients very quickly because the safety of those drugs is extremely well known. And who knew a few years ago that a lot of the drugs that are used in other therapeutic areas had what were then called side effects, but actually can be fantastic side effects for Parkinson's disease patients. So it's an industry, a science surrounding picking the best drugs from, and there are tens of thousands of drugs out there, and it's quite a skill. That's why we need a huge team to work out which ones are going to be beneficial in which context for Parkinson's patients. So over the past few years, we've been doing this. Oh yes, and of course we're not perfect. We obviously have to seek divine intervention whenever we. How did we start? So we knew that a drug used to treat hypertension, high blood pressure, called isradipine, if you were taking it, you were 30% less likely to develop Parkinson's. It was sort of extraordinary observation, and it was true in Denmark and in the UK. of course, that's very different from when you've got Parkinson's, whether you should be taking that same drug. But that trial is actually underway at the moment in America. At the same time, I was working on a diabetes treatment called exenatide. And I could see very compelling reasons why we should move it quickly into Parkinson's. So I designed a clinical trial with a consultant at Queen Square in London, and we ran that trial on this drug called exenatide. And I'll come on to the results of that of the first trial and the second of that. But those two drugs, both repurposed, one from cardiology and one from diabetes, with some promise, made us think, well, maybe we should do this in a joined-up way. Well, now we've been doing it for 5 years, and we've looked at best part of 1,000 drugs, and we've looked in huge detail at about 130 of them. So what's our progress been? Well, so our brief here is to evaluate, prioritize, and repurpose existing and new developing medications that may have benefits in Parkinson's. This is entirely for disease modification, not for symptomatic treatment, which is, of course, handled fairly well by existing medications that you will already be familiar with. So the aim is specifically to evaluate, prioritize, and repurpose existing regulatory-approved medications that may also have direct therapeutic disease-modifying benefits for patients with Parkinson's. So to accomplish that, we formed an international committee of acknowledged global experts, the good and the great of the day. And we published in the Journal of the Journal of Parkinson's Disease, the results of our first meeting. This is our current committee. You'll see Michael Schwarzschild there at number 5 after he's talked to them. I'm going to move him up to number 3. These are wonderful people with massive experience of clinical trials in Parkinson's, but also the biochemistry and the pharmacology and the physiology. And they're just a great team, and we overworked them horribly. Sorry, Michael, it's going to carry on. And I'll tell you what we do. So we task them to review drug dossiers. So every year, the committee gets about 300 pages of details of about 30 drugs and why we would dream of giving this cardiovascular drug to 100 Parkinson's patients. What possessed us to think that would be a good idea? So we write a rationale for each of these proposed treatments, and the committee gets these about a month or so before we have a face-to-face meeting. So everyone then gets together and we thrash out exactly what's appropriate to go into trial. A big key thing for us is that drugs are safe, but all of these drugs are already in man for various other reasons. So we have a good idea of what the safety profile is. So this is what the dossiers look like, a little bit of details about the drug, and a lot of science and wiggly lines and graphs, and we're all in our element here. This is one of the years when the committee voted. On the left-hand side, we've got the drugs that the committee were asked to review. So they get these dossiers electronically, 300 pages in a big book. You stand on it, you can see over the wall. And they then go off and do their own research. They don't just deal with what we've suggested. They do their own research, and then they meet, and then we thrash out what we should do. And we have a double voting system, a voting system at the beginning of all the face-to-face discussions and a voting system at the end. And this is all the individual committee members voting after, doing a huge amount of their own research, and then a big face-to-face discussion. So that's the process. It's very exacting for a drug, very hard for a drug to get through to be approved to test. We have a lot of clinical evaluation criteria that we apply. And so I think it's unique to any therapeutic area. I think it's also the largest drug repurposing program of any therapeutic area in the world, including in all of the industry ones, in terms of the number of drugs and the complexity of what we've done. But we felt it's necessary to go into this detail to finish up with the effective therapeutics. So it's aimed at delivering effective disease-modifying therapeutics that all Parkinson's patients deserve, and it's been going for 5 years. So I'm delighted today here in Sydney to deliver a 5-year progress report of our unique clinical trial initiative of our drugs aimed to slow, stop, and reverse PD. And going forward, I believe it's vitally important for Parkinson's patients across Australia to participate in this Garvan-led initiative of combining with our international program in new clinical trials. We're planning with Australian neurologists. We had meetings, as Anthony said last week, 2 days of meetings with Australian neurologists. I've met a number of others on other occasions in other cities. But I think it's important for this Garvan-led initiative in the clinical trial program that we're in the planning phase at the moment. No drugs yet to send into trial, but we're working hard. And I think that this will take everyone in the room, everyone across Australia, everyone in the world further forward by helping to deliver new, effective, disease-modifying treatments for Parkinson's patients that all Parkinson's patients deserve and have been waiting 200 years for. So what have we done? We've looked at over 700 drugs in some detail, working in more than 100 different ways, the drugs working in the cells in more than 100 different ways. And 89 of them, we have a triage system on these drugs. 89 of them have been discussed in great detail by the International Committee in our face-to-face meetings. And over the 5 years of our program, 31 drugs have been prioritized to go to trials. And of those, 8 are either underway or finished, and many more in plan. They're in advanced plans for moving into trials. So that's where we are on that. What have we done in terms of the trials that are underway? Well, if we look at from top left, Bydureon has already completed. It's a trial I'm going to come back to in a second. But that's the first diabetes treatment that I lifted out of the laboratory and put into Parkinson's patients. Liraglutide is very similar to that drug. It's also diabetes treatment, working in a similar way. I'm doing that trial in Los Angeles in Parkinson's patients who are insulin resistant. So they're on their way, the Parkinson's patients on their way to getting diabetes. And there's a good biochemical reason for doing that. Over here on the right-hand side, lixisenatide, that is also a sister drug. So on April 26th, I'll be in Toulouse in France, and we've got for the launch of that trial, and we're doing that in Parkinson's patients. They're de novo Parkinson's patients. So as Anthony was saying, it's better to move back to earlier stage Parkinson's disease. If you've got a disease-modifying treatment, the natural home for that is when you first diagnose Parkinson's patients, or even in where biomarkers may have told you you're on the way to getting Parkinson's. So the lixisenatide trial will be done in 20 centers across France, and it will be in de novo Parkinson's patients. So different patient groups. We're doing a simvastatin trial with about 200 patients in England. That's 23 hospitals across England. Not for its lipid-lowering properties that everyone knows, but this is one of those dirty drugs that we heard ROS, reactive oxygen species, being a problem in Parkinson's. They deal with that issue. They deal with a number of other inflammatory issues, the statins, and we're testing simvastatin. Deferoprone we heard about earlier, not as a drug, but as a problem. So iron, it was heard about in terms of metals being They build up in the substantia nigra, and they are not helpful in that location. Diferoprone is an iron chelator normally given to patients when they've been over-transfused. So they've actually been given too much iron, and it can happen in some circumstances. So we're giving an iron chelator to Parkinson's patients in 2 trials, almost the best part of 500 patients in France, and we're removing a level of iron from them to also get it out of the brain to see if that's clinically beneficial. 2 other trials, Ambroxol and EPI-589, I'll just discuss at the very end of my talk, because they are our first steps into personalized medicine, because they are looking at genetic forms of Parkinson's and specific drugs for those genetic forms. 3 others on the right I haven't mentioned, N-acetylcysteine, EPI-743, and nilotinib. We're launching the nilotinib trial in collaboration with Michael J. Fox and the Van Andel Institute later this year. I'm not going to go through these drugs, but these are 16 prioritized by that great committee. And these will the drugs we discussed with Australian neurologists on Thursday and Friday last week as a way forward to do at least some of the drugs on this list in clinical trials in Australia when we're going through the planning stage at the moment. But that's the intention. Exenatide was our first trial. We did it. We published it. There were lots of wonderful words being said about the approach of bringing drugs through quickly that has safety records in other therapeutic areas. It went so well, we employed a neurologist to stay with the patient. They were on the drug for 1 year. We actually paid for a neurologist to stay with them for a 2nd year to see how they got on, and it was all very good, and we decided that we would do a 2nd, much bigger trial. That's now just completed, and we're just writing up the paper at the moment. The principal investigator is writing the paper, and I think it'll be published in May. So the name of the game in medicine is replication. You get a good response. Can you repeat it? So we're just doing that, and that's an extremely important study in our progress, and I'd urge you to read it when it's published. I think it may be published in the Lancet, but anyway, it'll be published in May or June, and that will be a very interesting read for everyone in Parkinson's around the world. That's the study that we've just completed. Just a quick word about, I've been asked to make my talk rather short, so just a few words. If you go on our website, you'll find details about many of these trials that are underway in hospitals around the world. Just a little bit of, excuse me for a rather scientific slide here, but the reason is that it summarizes some of the drugs we've got in trial and some of the ones we're proposing are studied in Australia. So in green, we've got drugs which basically help Parkinson's cells have more energy. So they in various ways, Parkinson's cells and neurons are limited by the amount of energy they have available to do all the things they have to do. And the ones in green tackle that issue in various ways. The ones in red, we heard about alpha-synuclein from Anthony earlier. They tackle the alpha-synuclein, the clogging of proteins in various ways. And over here, we've got anti-inflammatory approaches. We've got a number of drugs that tackle all of those and some of the other targets which I don't have enough time to go into. Personalized medicine. So these are various genetic forms of Parkinson's plus idiopathic, that's regular Parkinson's patients. How do those genetic forms interact with the various drug classes that we are studying and maybe in time combining? What are we doing? Well, we have a clinical trial at the moment on a drug called EPI-589, which tackles a lot of these genetic forms of Parkinson's, and also Ambroxol, which tackles a GBA form of Parkinson's, which typically affects Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews. So it runs through a particular group. And these are our first steps in moving big clinical trials on large groups of patients towards personalized medicine, the best drug for a particular patient. But we have to go through the larger clinical trial process before we can actually start. Well, we've already started to try to do personalized medicine, but the genetic forms are quite easy to do that. But that's our intention, to get the right drug for the right patient over time within our program. So I think this is my last slide. The need for effective disease-modifying therapies for all subgroups of Parkinson's is urgent, and patients throughout Australia can help when we're able. I mean, as Anthony said, we're still planning, but it's important to tell you all of this news. When these trials start to get up and running, then please get involved. The Cure Parkinson's LCT initiative has already generated a number of innovative and highly promising disease-modifying clinical trials that otherwise would have never been brought to Parkinson's clinic. Here in Australia, this Garvan-led initiative is a sort of groundbreaking approach that we've come to expect from this outstanding world-class institute that we're all sitting in, well, except for me. I would just say that it's the funding and regulatory requirements, not the science, that's slowing down the delivery of fundamental new safe therapeutics for Parkinson's. My committee, and thank you, Michael, and your colleagues, have now given us 30 really superbly promising treatments with compelling biochemical and pharmaceutical reasons for us to believe why they're likely to slow neurodegeneration. And it's just the funding and the practicalities that are slowing us down at the moment. Please help.